Right. Evening, everybody. This is questionable decision to do this live stream, but I think it's worth doing. I would like to give an extra special welcome to all my rapidly growing number of new followers. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for coming. Many of you are coming from that video I did a documentary I made a couple of years ago about my colleague Sam selling her home in Taunton. Some of you have come from Wayne Goss's YouTube channel today. Thank you very much. Welcome. You're all welcome too. Everyone's welcome. Everyone's welcome. This is Moving Home with Charlie. I'm Charlie. The point of this channel is that it is part of my career ambition to reach a situation where we have a home for everyone. A home for everyone. That's my stated career goal. And with a combination of this channel and that website under my left armpit, Best Agent, which is all in progress in its early days. And I have a plan that ultimately results in no homelessness, everyone having a decent home. It's an ambitious plan. It's going to take an awful lot to do it. But it's important that all of you, including especially those of you who are new here, understand that that's my goal, a home for everyone. So what am I doing anything about politics? Well, I did study politics in my teens. I studied it, and politics is the single biggest influence on the housing market. It's the single biggest reason for our housing crisis right now. And I, as a student of politics, and anyway, have been politically neutral my whole life. I have voted 4 different ways in the last 5 elections. In the last 5 elections, I have voted Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, and Green, not in that order. All right. I usually vote tactically. Sometimes I vote my conscience, depends how cross I am. But I have never been just a supporter of any one party. And I've never seen any sense in doing that either, if you really care about politics. Give everyone, hello, Jim Bob. Hello, David Pyer. New name, welcome. Amir Sheikh. Hi there, Leo Lees, Andrew Taylor, Ricky Heath, Nikki Nike, Nick Woodward, and Tina B. Lots of regular names there. Hello, everyone on TikTok. We're also live streaming on TikTok this evening because I always leave you guys out. I'm sorry about that. I can't simultaneously stream here and you can't live chat here as easily. Now, I've been getting many accusations, and this funny thing is that accusation is the right phrase for it. I'm being constantly accused, especially on X, of being you are a reform supporter and you are biased for the Reform Party and you are definitely a reformer and don't pretend otherwise. And those guys don't believe that I'm politically neutral. For those of you who've been, by the way, can you all hear me okay? Am I quiet? Someone complained the other evening that I was too quiet. That's not a complaint I often get in my life. Bring the microphone a bit closer in case you are thinking that I'm quiet. So people have been accusing me of being a biased reform supporter. Those of you who've been watching my channel for a long time will remember as far back as 2 years ago, what I said was that the housing market more than anything else needs change. Any change. It's been absolutely gridlocked for decades. And that there is no prospect or very little prospect of change from either of the 2 main parties. And I remember saying well over a year ago, when the next election finally comes, vote for anyone but Labour and Tory. Anyone but Labour and Tory, right? Just anyone but those 2, because voting for either of those 2 will get us more nothing, more of a failure to improve the housing market. And this is not a political stance. This is a impassioned plea from a housing point of view. So have I been excited by Reform UK's sudden explosion onto the political scene? Yes, I have, because it's the only glimmer of hope that we might have of some kind of change. They're not going to win the election. Of course, they're not going to. Labour's going to win the election, sadly. Don't assume that this Tory government has definitely been the worst government of my entire life, no question. That doesn't mean that the next one can't be any worse. I see people everywhere going, yeah, but nothing can be worse than this Tory government. Labour can't. You watch, and I plan to talk in this video about that. And please, I invite you all. Thank you. You're watching me. So we got Naeem Khan on X. Hi there, Miss Jane 782. I want your live interaction on this live stream. I want to know what you think. I want you to challenge me if you think anything I'm saying is bullshit. If you think that I am displaying bias, if you think that I've got unconscious bias, you want to call me on it. Tell me about it, please. Do need another slap of my cup though. Now, one of the reasons I wouldn't be biased for reform or anyone else right now, in particular for reform, is because I still don't know enough about there are three things on which I judge any political party before I vote for it, in no particular order, but these things are equally important to me. The strength of their leadership, because without strong leadership, fuck all gets done. How unified they are, how well they will work as a team in government. Because again, unless you have a well-functioning, high-functioning executive, nothing gets done. And only then do I actually look at the policies, because the policies are irrelevant unless you've got strength of leadership and a high-functioning team that will make changes happen. Because what most of the governments for the last 30, 40 years are guilty of is very little real change, very little meaningful change. In fact, I would say that probably the single most important achievement of any government for the last 40 years, and I don't like saying this because he's actually my least favorite prime minister of all, was Tony Blair getting the Good Friday Agreement over the line. Right, that was a phenomenal achievement, a fantastic achievement. I think that there's no doubt he had a major part in achieving that, but a huge amount of groundwork had been done laying that for him in leading up to it. But just to give you an example, right, to me, that was a groundbreaking. I mean, I'm from a generation that used to remember IRA bombs in London on my way to work. That was a massive achievement. And since then, very little's been achieved. Now, lots of you could argue, and there's a very strong argument about the fact that the current financial situation we're going through is actually still a hangover from the global financial crisis. And a lot of people will actually point the finger partially to blame at Gordon Brown as Chancellor and then Prime Minister. And they say, yes, he bailed the crisis out by quick thinking at the last minute. That's not mutually exclusive to the fact that they contributed to it by loosening banking regulations, and there is truth in that as well. So we're paying for now in public services the austerity that the Tory government that came in 2010 felt was necessary. Now, forgive me if I'm rambling, and tell me if I'm rambling. Just shout at me in the comments. I've got you right here on screen, and I can see what you guys are all saying. So I am watching this. Now, I'm especially talking to two groups of people this evening that I would love to hear from. Ship Warden asks, how can you cure homelessness? That's for another video. It's a very, very long plan over probably 20 years, but it does work. The two groups I want to talk to are, I want to talk to anyone who's intending to vote Labour and ask you why, because I think that's something that everyone who votes Labour is going to live to regret. Not because of the policy problems, or their policies are good or bad, or they're going to tax whatever, raise taxes or not raise taxes, but because they are going to sit there fighting amongst themselves and achieving nothing and getting all wrapped up in red tape while the country burns financially. That's what's going to happen. And I do not understand why anyone has any faith in Keir Starmer. He's the most, he just flips and flops like a wind vane about his opinions. He changes his mind all the time. He's just the most, I've got nothing against him personally, right? But as the leader of a party, he just got this expression on his face like he doesn't really know what he thinks. And he always sounds like he's reading from a script. And he's always got to repeat the same messages. And it's just the sort of worst kind of corporate shill that feels like he's been put there by someone else. And there is no cohesion in the senior ranks of the Labour Party that I can see. This is not party political. This is objective viewpoint, right? I see no functioning enough to get anything done by that government. So that's the first group of people, Labour supporters. I would love, Mr. Rees says you're rambling. Thank you, correct. Labour supporters. I want to know why you want to vote Labour, because I think it's going to be a mistake. Not because of the politics. Right. The other group of people is people who are voting for the first time, whether it's because you're only just old enough to vote now, or whether it's because you've never voted before. I've had people messaging me on X saying that they're in their late 30s and they've only just voted to register this time for the first time because it's the first time they think there's something worth voting for that isn't the uni party or the two-party system. Oh God, you get so many these. Sorry, rambling. So the housing crisis, I think, and we can talk about the causes of it, but that's not the point. We all know what the causes of it are. That there are a range of things: not enough houses in the right places, bad monetary policy, and tax and inflation and rates and all that kind of stuff, right? But the only hope the housing market has of any improvement is by getting a government of some kind in that actually starts to make some of the changes that everyone agrees are needed. The Tories haven't done it. It must be pointed out that they did achieve the leasehold reform bill, and that's made some welcome improvements, but it's really only scratching the surface of what's changed, right? But look how difficult it was for them to achieve that. They only just got that over the line, barely, right? After years and years and years and years of trying. Sorry, I'm reading your comments and I'm finding it distracting. Yeah, no, and this is great. I'm getting some opinions here about why you guys believe that Keir Starmer is going to be good in power. But yeah, I also want to know anyone who thinks that I am pretending not to be biased for reform. I want to know why you think that. Paris Hilton, someone who's called Paris Hilton, says, I work in politics, also 26, so housing is important to me because of my age, but in my job, we're all saying Labour will be ran very civil service-like and just offer stability, not change. Thank you. That's interesting. I don't disagree with that. And can you tell us any more about what you do in politics? Be great to know. Amanda Harrison says Labour supporters are just Labour supporters due to misplaced loyalty. I think that's a fair observation as well. Do we have anyone who wants to debate? Mr. Rees says Labour will have the lefties coming out the cupboards on the 5th of July, and with such a huge majority, Keir won't be able to contain them. I'm old. I've seen many governments. Things change very slowly. That's interesting. So what you're saying is they're going to get in, and once they're in power, the harder left faction of the Labour Party are going to come out and try and take over. That's really interesting. Yeah, that's a very valid observation or expectation. Joe Montoya asks me, am I voting reform? I don't know what I'm voting yet. Truly, I don't know what I'm voting yet, and I will explain in this video why I don't know what I'm voting for yet. Yeah, Eddie Ward says Starmer is not a leftist, he's a centrist. That's true. But that's the problem, okay? Both Labour and Tory have become centre. This is, I want to explain why, with my amateur background as a politics student, why I think we're seeing this wild explosion of reform. By the way, let's for some of you who haven't been paying attention to the news today, let me just share a couple of things with you that I've got up here to share. So, yes, I have a very, very clickbaity title, don't I? Let me explain the clickbaity title, okay? This is the post. Can you see that on screen? I've got to make sure you got it on screen. Yeah, you have got it there. Let me just get it like this. So this is on X, and it's an account called Election Maps quoting a poll called People Polling. Now, apparently, People Polling I've never heard of them before. They're quite right wing and they're not very taken very seriously, but they are members of the polling council. So they are a legitimate polling outfit, but they're showing this incredible reform on 24 points, having jumped up 7 in the last week, and Labour and Conservative both losing 4 points each. Now, this X account goes on to say an outlier of epic proportions, and I don't believe it one bit. But here's what this might look like in terms of seats. Labour 389, Reform 109, Lib Dem 72, Conservative 28. And then they put a map of what the country would look like there. Okay, so that's one thing that's come out this evening. The next bit of news is quite interesting, is The Independent saying Sunak on course to be the first sitting Prime Minister to lose seat as Tories face wipeout in poll. I mean, that's a pretty bad way to go out, isn't it? The only sitting Prime Minister in history ever to have lost his own seat in an election. Then we've got this Telegraph headline, Sunak to lose seat in Tory wipeout, major poll predicts, and has a picture of the country at the last election and what's forecasting this election. I've got that. I'm sorry to all of you on TikTok following this. I wish I could show you my screen. I suppose I could a little bit. The Express has put out a story saying that Angela Rayner might be losing her seat in the general election. And I actually am a bit of a fan of Angela Rayner. Right? I'm a fan of any politician that genuinely stands up for what they personally believe in and are not corporate shills of parts of the establishment. And whatever you may think of it, some people think she's thick because of her accent, and that's a ridiculously stupid thing to think, right? It doesn't matter what anyone's accent is or how they speak. It doesn't matter. It's the substance of what they say is the only thing that matters. And I see Angela Rayner as an interesting politician because she doesn't take any prisoners. She doesn't take any shit. She comes from a much less privileged background than most of the politicians in the House of Commons, and yet she makes a pretty good account of herself. I'm not saying I agree with her politics at all. This is what I mean about I think Angela Rayner has got bucket loads more charisma and leadership quality than Keir Starmer. Now, some of my followers on X reckon that Angela Rayner might actually take over from Keir Starmer after about 18 months, which would be interesting. But for that to happen, she'd have to keep her seat. And I know this is the Express, but they're saying that people in her constituency of Ashton-under-Lyme are furious. But I think that's just the Express getting headlines. Then we've got, now, by the way, I did invite Housing Stig on this evening. However, he was up until 4 a.m. last night, indulging as he does, and has chosen not to join us. If you're watching this, Alex, sorry for throwing you under the bus. Are you there? Are you watching? Say hi in the comments if you are, because I know you might be. Yeah, so many interesting comments. Some people are reacting to Amanda Ray. Saying she's a hypocrite. I don't know a human being who isn't a hypocrite, right? This is the thing that everyone's got to remember. Just calm down about expecting politicians to be these perfect human beings with no flaws, who've never done anything illegal and never said anything I regret. It's fucking stupid. They are as flawed as the best and the rest of us, okay? They're just people. It doesn't matter what they said and done in the past, I don't think. It matters what they stand for today and what they might achieve in the future. And I don't write anybody off because of how they speak or where they come from or anything else like that. That is actually really narrow-minded, I think. And you can't call people hypocrites, but we are all hypocrites. It's part of our nature. It's human nature. She cheated the tax man. Patricia T says, I think you're joking, aren't you? But maybe you're being serious. Don't know. Tina Fey says it doesn't matter if she has charisma, she's corrupt. I didn't know if she's corrupt. I wasn't aware that she was corrupt, and if she's actually been convicted of anything, or whether that's just someone's opinion that is unsubstantiated, who knows? But again, you can't go on anything that isn't substantiated. Never mind that. This graph, I put a link to this graph below in the comments below, is one that Alex posted, Housing Stig posted, that shows the share of votes in the general elections since 1832, right? So we're going back nearly 200 years, 190 years, 192 years. And for the first half of it, you can see it was just blue and yellow, which was the Liberals or the Liberal Democrats, right? And very little else. And then suddenly, at the beginning of the last century, Labour appeared and massively took over. And since then, it's again been just basically red and blue with a little bit of yellow left in the middle. And what's going to happen in this election, by the looks of things, is for the first time ever, for the first time in about 100 years, we're about to have our parliament reshaped. And that's absolutely massive, 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 massive. Getting some interesting comments on TikTok. Starmer will get a no confidence vote and Sadiq Khan will work his way in somehow. Starmer wants to be the next player in power for 10 years. Honestly, I mean, if Labour gets in and holds on to power for that long, that's a nightmare for everybody. It really is, because they're just, it's nothing to do. I'm not pro or anti-Labour. I'm saying that team with that leader is just bad news for the country, because they won't get anything done. They'll stand there wondering what to do and not knowing what to do. Now, I want to go on to explain now why I think this is happening. So very roughly, for those of you who perhaps never cared about politics before, you didn't know about politics, Tories and Labour on the right and the left, have always been pretty clearly demarcated right and left. Within their parties, they've had their own left and right within the parties. But what's happened, and the Lib Dems are always kind of in the middle, right? The Lib Dems are the centrists, Tories on the right, Labour on the left. What's happened gradually over the last 20 years is that the two parties have done that and have overlapped, right? Massively overlapped. And now between them cover the centre ground. And what they've done is they've left out all the right-wing Tories who are not centrists and all the left-wing Labour voters who are not centrists, who feel like they've had nobody to vote for a long time. And bizarrely, Reform is coming along, and it is my observation that Reform is taking votes from both sides, right? All of the disaffected Labour voters and all the disaffected Tory voters who are not centrists, who feel that the centralisation of politics is why the country's in the mess we're in, are going, Farage is a bloke we now recognise for a long time. A lot of them are Brexiteers, not all of them, by the way, are Brexiteers. And they're going, look, he achieved, Farage got something done. He's a person that gets things done. And it's really interesting to note that until Farage announced that he was going to lead the Reform Party wasn't doing so. It was doing okay, but it wasn't really making any big inroads. And this is why you need two things. You need a leader and the party politic, right? The party that can actually do stuff and have the manifestos and everything else. And so that is why I think you're seeing, and a lot of Labour voters are saying, oh no, they're going to take votes from the Tories. They are taking votes from the Tories, no doubt. They already have, I think, but I also think that they are taking an uncomfortably large number of votes from Labour as well. And I have got two of my oldest friends, right? I'm talking since we were like 8-10 years old. One of them died in the wool right-wing Tory, has never voted anything other than Tory in his whole life. The other one always voted Labour. Not quite such a sort of die-hard Labour voter. I think he may have voted Lib Dem once or twice, but basically always Labour. Both of those guys are now voting Reform in this election and going, thank God there's a party that we can vote for. It's fascinating. And I think this is the other thing that's happened, is that there is this real snobbery amongst slightly better than average educated people. And they love to look down their noses and patronize less well-educated, less well-informed people and make them feel stupid and call them names. And actually, that in itself is a far worse display of ignorance than someone that just doesn't know what's going on because they never learnt about it, right? And this is where I see this divisiveness coming in. And a lot of these people, it's kind of proof that a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And you get people who find themselves slightly better than average at arguing and slightly more informed than normal. But these guys, that particular demographic, and I include myself in this because I went through this, but thankfully, I like to think I came out the other side of it a little bit. You like to think you understand what's going on better than other people, but unfortunately, it makes you a dangerous and potentially useful idiot to those who are clever, far cleverer, and would brainwash us. Right? This is another massive social divide that is not in any way shown in politics or in the news. And so you've got what are actually a minority, they are not in the majority, a minority of these very public, very opinionated, quite snobby, both left and right wing. You got people who people on the left call far right, and people who are on the right call the other ones commies. This extremism. It's like, you're a communist, you're a racist, you're a racist. It's just, oh, come on, guys. And then you get the people who, in my view, are able to rise above that and just go, actually, what everybody wants is the same. What we're really arguing about is the best way to achieve it. It's never about, when you find yourself arguing about people's personal, oh, this person said that once, so it doesn't matter. Because no matter what someone said in the past, people change, people turn over a new leaf. They might well be someone who can achieve great things in the future. And I just think staying objective, especially with the country in such a shit state that it's in now, it's more important than ever to keep an open mind. Just keep an open mind and always question your own assumptions, always question your own beliefs. And if you find yourself, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, you find yourself thinking, well, I'm over here, I don't really know why I'm over here. I repeat the things that I hear other people saying quite a lot because that's my social group and I want to fit in with them. I would just quietly to yourself, just take a step back and think, maybe am I keeping an open enough mind, or am I finding myself triggered too easily by other things? Because this is important, and this is the first chance this country's had for some meaningful change for a long time. By the way, thank you very much. I'm getting people. So Ribs 747, thank you very much. Appreciate that. He says, you have a level head that's obviously from your channel. That said, when you shared a poll average on X that included GB News figures, super skewed to Reform, it did come across as bias, simply because sharing such a skewed data set didn't make sense. Understand. Now, I think I've shared other ones as well. I've talked about, for example, one of the things I've said is, based only on housing manifestos, Liberal Democrats would get my vote. They're the only people saying that they would build 150,000 social homes every year. That's what they say in their policy document that I've actually got right here. Right? I can share it with you, just so you know I've actually been looking at this stuff. Let me just show you here. Right, this is a Google it, tackling the housing crisis, the Lib Dems policy paper in motion. Right, and right here it's got here, and I love this. The problem is they've got no leadership and they've got no chance of being government. Building 150,000 social homes a year, including council, by the end of the next parliament. Now that is the single best housing policy I've seen, because it actually solves multiple problems and it creates competition for the private sector, and it helps solve housing crisis at its most extreme and acute areas. And this is easily the most thought through, most budgeted, the most detailed thought through housing manifesto of any of the parties, right? Go and have a look at it. It's good. But the trouble is, it's irrelevant, sadly, because they aren't going to get into power. They're not even, okay, there is always an outside chance that they might become part of a coalition. Maybe actually if there's a shock election result and Labour's not got a majority, it might partner with the Lib Dems to form a majority. That could happen, and then maybe they would be in power. That would be an outcome that I would welcome, actually, rather than the Labour majority. A Labour Lib Dem coalition, there are lots of reasons I don't want that, but if it did happen, and if the Lib Dems were able to make that happen, that would be cool. And I go back to what I said at the beginning, which is that it's not just about policy, it's about leadership and ability to deliver, and of course likelihood of being in power to do so. Otherwise it's all irrelevant. So Mr. Beats asks, Charlie, what are your thoughts on the 20k tax bracket? I mean, I think it's a very, very good idea. I think it will be a lifesaver. It's not going to happen, unfortunately, because they're not going to get into power. But it would be a lifesaver for a lot of people who are right on the breadline at the moment. And I also think that it would incentivize work more. So, without having done any detailed analysis of it, I think that would be good. But I don't want to get into non-housing related stuff. So, someone called Whiz All Over the City says reform, national socialism without the socialism. So you're saying nationalism. Farage is just a chin wobbler. So this is an example. There's no disrespect here, right? But this is an example of what I see as just a totally unproductive non-argument. So Whiz All Over the City says, Farage is just a chin wobbler. Boil it down, he's just a big bag of piss and beer farts. Right. So there's a great example of a funny and entertaining, and I'd love to have that conversation in the pub, but not necessarily a constructive argument. James Barnes says we need PR, proportional representation. And again, for those of you who don't know, first past the post means whoever gets the most votes, even if it's a minority, gets the seat in Parliament, right? It's like if there are 5 candidates you can vote for, one of them gets 25%, and the others all get less than that. The one with 25% gets in, even though 75% didn't vote for them. Okay, and the argument for first past the post, I'm not saying I'm arguing for or against it, is that it tends to keep a strong two-party system in place. What's the benefit of that, you might ask? Well, it's easier for them to pass laws, and there is an argument that says, therefore, more progress happens under first past the post. And when you look at other countries that have got proportional representation, like Italy is the example I remember of where they change government so often and very little gets changed. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with either of those points of view, but first past the post is the old system, and proportional representation is a newer system that's kind of fairer, and you have a first vote and then a second vote, and it can work better in some instances. There's no doubt. And do we need to reform the electoral system here? I think definitely it's out of date, especially when you get parties that are getting a very large percentage of the overall vote, yet the number of seats they get in Parliament doesn't reflect that. Jack Waldron. I've got to put this on because you've sent me a lovely gift there. It says video game controller evolves into muscled version of itself under the word LVL+. You'll have to explain that to me, I'm afraid. That's out. That's above my pay grade, that comment. Okay, I'm looking for more comments about it. I still haven't seen a Labour voter telling me why they want to vote Labour. I suspect that the title of this video has probably put Labour voters off, hasn't it? Do we have any Labour voters here? I really want to know why you think it's a good idea to vote Labour. Come on, the polls say that you're in the majority. There must be some of you here. Okay, Aaron Hughes makes a pretty powerful comment. I would have to leave this country if reform ever got into power. I don't see it happening, however, fortunately. Aaron, what is that based on policies, or is that based on personal beliefs that you think? I'd love you to elaborate on why you would actually go to the lengths of leaving the country. Because right now, I mean, the current government makes me want to leave the country, and Labour, if they don't, if it carries on with more infighting and no change, so the politicians all fighting over each other while the rest of us suffer, that's a reason to leave the bloody country, as far as I'm concerned. James Barnes asks, how is the 20k tax bracket affordable? So you're saying if they raise the income tax threshold from 12.5, I think it is, to 20 grand, as an employer, I should know this. How is it affordable? So they have got a perfectly legitimate method or strategy. I'm not saying I'm for or against it, where they stop paying the banks interest on money that came from quantitative easing. It's done in other countries as well, and that would save £35 billion a year. That's one of the. That's what they're saying. As far as off the top of my head, correct me if I'm wrong, people. Will I am on X says, thoughts on reform stamp duty abolition up to 750. Again, it's irrelevant because they're not going to get into power, but abolishing stamp duty up to 750 grand is a great idea because it would make moving cheaper and easier. I think stamp duty should be abolished completely, and replaced with a different form of tax on the property market, but not that one. The stamp duty is it's a tax on moving. It slows things down. It kills social mobility, and it prevents people from moving. And so raising the stamp duty threshold to 750k would mean that most people moving house would be able to move more easily and for less money. And the more people that move, the easier it becomes to move. So I would be in favor of that particular policy. Now, I've just seen a comment that's reminded me of what I was going to say about voting. So how I vote depends on two big things. So once I've chosen who I want to vote for, I then make two decisions. What's more important to me, the country as a whole or my local community? Because they are very, very, very different things to consider, right? For example, if I was someone who was really only concerned with my local community, because I never leave my local community, my whole life, my home life, my working life, everything is in my local community, and that's what matters to me, then my vote is going to be for whoever I think is the most worthwhile member of parliament for my constituency, right? That's in the event that I think my constituency is more important to me and my vote than the country as a whole. Okay. And in that scenario, I would put party policies to one side, and I would want to vote for the individual human being, the MP, a bit like how I choose agents. I want to choose them based on who they are, not who they work for, but who they are as a person. I would vote for the local MP that made the biggest difference to what I wanted to happen in my constituency. So the community, improving the community, helping people out. Okay, so if you are someone who's local first, national second, then I would literally, I'd be disregarding the national party policies, and I would just be looking at the track records of the local people I could vote for. If national is more important to you, then it's all about party policies, about leadership, about not just the actual party leader, but also the senior people and whether they're going to form a functioning team. What's the caliber of the team going to be like? And then I would go, so let's just say, for example, so I don't want to vote for Labour, right? If I was looking at this nationally, I wouldn't want to vote for Labour. But if I happened to be in a safe Labour seat that was clearly going to be a landslide Labour win anyway, then I would look into what's called vote swapping. So if I was wanting to vote for national reasons, and my Labour is going to be the winner in my constituency because it's really obvious, it's a really strong, safe seat, but I don't want that to happen, I would look into vote swapping, and it's totally legitimate, it's totally legal, it's totally allowed. It's done in Parliament all the time. And I would look to see if I could swap my vote with someone else, where I could vote for them in my constituency, they could vote for me in their constituency, and we would improve the chances of changing the status quo in those. Yeah. So there you are. There's another way. So how I vote depends on all these different things. It depends on the leaders, the strength of the team, and the policies. Or if it's just local, then it depends on the caliber of the individual. And that's why, I think there are some Tory MPs who are going to get voted back in based on their track record as a local Tory MP and how well they've looked after their constituents. And what constituents will generally do is they will reward really good local MPs who have delivered and worked hard and made changes and actually helped local communities. Those are the guys that get voted back in no matter what their party is doing, because their local communities realize that actually this is a person we want as our MP for this constituency. All right. So there you go. Little crash course in Charlie's view on politics. Eddie Ward says, Farage lives off boil in the bag curry in a 4-bedroom bungalow in Kent. He knows nothing. All right, Eddie. But again, not really relevant, is it? To say he knows nothing isn't true. I mean, his time in the European Parliament was 20 years there, I think. He knows a lot. You could argue that he's had a bigger impact than any other individual human being in British politics in the last 20 years. So it's simply not true to say that he knows nothing. Nick Who says Farage is a lying Trump supporter who will do whatever the highest bidder says. That may well be true. Maybe he is a lying Trump supporter, and maybe I don't know if he does what the highest bidder says. That's, I think, what the other parties are guilty of, in my opinion. Andrew Hughes said, I would consider moving if Labour got into power, but then again, I could give up my business and live with the state. Come on. No, someone tell me you're a Labour voter. All right. Eddie Ward says Starmer is more normal than any of the Tories. Eddie, can I assume? Oh yeah, okay. You've gone on to say you're a potential Labour voter. All right. Normal. Why is that a good thing in a politician? You need leaders to be nutters. If leaders aren't nutters, they're useless leaders. And history teaches us that. You need nutters, because only nutters would want that job for the right reasons. Normal people who want that job, why do they want it? This is what I understand. It doesn't make sense. I disagree with that point. I don't think Starmer was normal than any of the Tories. I think Starmer is, unfortunately, I mean, wasn't he involved when he was running the Crown Prosecution Service with the post office prosecutions? I just think he's shown bad judgment. Okay. Roger Ball, I agree with this comment. It says, voting for either Labour or Conservative is the Einstein's definition of madness. Okay, Blind Ledge on TikTok says, who's a nutter that's actually been decent? Well, Winston Churchill was a nutter, and he was hated at the time. It's a good question, right? He was hated at the time. I think Maggie Thatcher was a nutter. Again, I'm not saying she was good or bad, but my God, she did make changes, didn't she? She actually got stuff done. Tony Blair was a nutter, thinking that he was doing God's work in Iraq. I mean, you just, sorry, that's just batshit crazy. Genuinely believing, as he does to this day, that he was doing God's work in Iraq. And this is not an anti-religious stance. It's if you are leading a country, that cannot be your justification for sending troops to their death. So, I mean, I would always vote for a talented nutter over someone boring and normal who will achieve nothing. I mean, look at John Major. Remember John Major? He was normal, boring. Who else have we had? Boris Johnson, nutter, got the biggest majority in Parliament for a long time, which actually gave him a mandate to go and do stuff. But he was so much of a nutter that he threw it away, and the Conservatives threw it away as well. Coffedy on YouTube says, I would like to see more from Labour, definitely, but I think they begin to move the nation in the right direction after 14 years of degradation. So, Coffedy, thank you for that comment, because this is exactly why I think Labour's getting... this seems like a very reasonable stance, right? After 14 years of degradation, and absolutely no disagreement on that, completely agree, 14 years of utter failure, they would begin to move the nation in the right direction. So even when you have a strong majority in parliament, it is not easy to get anything done. The system is so many hoops and arrows and things and gauntlets to get through. You've got to be ferociously strong and keep your team, because if you just have infighting in your team, nothing gets done. And I think this is the mistake that Labour voters are going to make. And I think it's a huge mistake. And I get why it's being made, because to many ordinary people who have not studied politics, who've not studied leadership, who've not studied the effectiveness of teams and that kind of stuff, then yeah, Labour, I mean, how could they be worse than the Tories? It's going to be better, right? And this is why I really want to question that assumption. It is what people are thinking it's a safe assumption. Oh, well, it can't be worse than the Tories, can it? It's going to be, in my view, it is going to be even worse. It's going to be an absolute shit show. Right. Kyriakos Paul, I hope I pronounced that right, says, will vote Labour, at least scrapping or making planning permission easier. Hope. Well, I'm a big supporter of that policy, but you've got to remember that every government for the last 20, 30 years has made the same promise and failed to deliver it. So before you cast your vote, what is it that makes you think that this Labour government will be able to deliver it when none of the others have? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. Patricia T says, I'm not sure Labour wants change. Well, judging by their manifesto, they definitely don't want change. Tina B says, I'm usually a soft-hearted Labour lover, but there are no friends to women these days, so I'm now floating. Interesting. Thank you, guys. This is a really nice, balanced, no one's getting angry that I can see. Okay, Wiz all over the city, who's talking about farts and beer and pee and stuff, is now trying to bring it back into the room a bit. Just providing a little balance in the comments here. Why does Farage not get challenged on the realism of their policies? That's a legitimate question. I think probably because there's no prospect of them being in power yet. But I have heard them challenged. I mean, every time I've seen him interviewed, he has been challenged on the policies. Rich Brown asks a good question. I don't know the answer to this. Charlie, if Labour win a strong majority, will the bond markets dump gilts? Big jump in interest rates? Question mark. Good question. Don't know. Patricia T again makes a very, very salient observation. It will be difficult for any PM in the next 6 months. No honeymoon. I agree with that. Yeah, Mr. Susi, I can't quite read that on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, TikTok is not LinkedIn, is it? It's many things. It's not LinkedIn. He does get challenged. Obviously, haven't watched the debates. Yeah, he does get challenged. If you're not a Farage fan, then you're not going to watch him on TV, and therefore you won't see him getting challenged. He is being challenged. Aaron Hughes says, thank you for responding, Aaron. My concern is that reform will cut spending to vital public services. Nigel's love for the US healthcare system concerns me. Yeah, I don't share that view. He's taking what he's saying. They would take a more business-like approach to it, and rather than just throwing money at things, thinking money makes it better. What's happened in the last decade, lots more money's been thrown at the NHS, but it hasn't made it perform any better, has it? I'm not sure he's going to cut stuff. He wants to cut waste, mostly in the civil service, but one of the things he says a lot is that the terrible state of public services is what needs to be fixed and won't get fixed by the current guys. Interesting. Luke and Stan Explore says, whoever gets in won't do well. Too much damage has been done. Housing market is unlikely to improve under any party. Interesting. I agree generally. Now, one of the things that... I've had a mind blank. Where is it? So I've shown the Liberal Democrats. Okay, we all know that basically Tories and Labour have got virtually no concrete housing manifesto pledges. They're all talking about building millions of new houses, which they've done every election in the past, with no explanation of how they're going to do it. They're talking about reforming planning. Well, then, Tories, why didn't you already do that? And Labour, what makes you think you can do it? Liberal Democrat manifesto was good. I've also got here the Reform Housing Manifesto, a very brief one. It's worth running through, I think. Here it is. So Britain has a housing crisis. Let me just get that over there. So they're saying review the planning system again. How the I don't yet know how strong Reform's leadership team would be if and when they got into government. So I don't know. I'm not commenting on the credibility of this, and we can't assume it's any more or less credible than anyone else's. I agree with that, right? But review the planning system, fast track planning and tax incentives for development of brownfield sites, reform social housing law, prioritize local people and those who've paid into the system. Foreign nationals must go to the back of the queue, not the front. That's going to be popular with a lot of people, obviously, and unpopular with a lot of other people. Scrapping Section 24 for landlords. Now, this is controversial, and initially when I saw it, I didn't agree with it. The tax system should encourage smaller landlords into the rental markets, not penalize them. Now, I think one of the reasons I initially disagree with this was because I think that one of the problems in the rentals system with poor landlords is too many amateur landlords who don't know what they're doing, resulting in very bad experiences for a lot of tenants. And when you get too many of these amateur landlords, when actually being a landlord is like running a business, it causes real problems. And not only that, they end up buying up because it's cheap to buy them up, right? And they end up causing house prices to go up because you've got this new demographic of people buying property to invest in, to be a landlord, who otherwise wouldn't buy it. And so they are buying up typical first-time buyer homes. And that was why I was against this initially. But it goes on to say, we will restore landlords' right to deduct finance costs and mortgage interest. So in other words, it's going to make it more profitable to be a landlord. Now, so that's the bit I didn't like, because I think that allows too many amateurs back in to be landlords, and you need landlords to be professionals. Abolishing the Renters Reform Bill. And initially I was like, okay, that's terrible, but then it goes on to say, existing legislation was inadequate to address bad practices. Instead, we will boost the monitoring, appeals and enforcement processes for renters with grievances. Again, I've got no reason to believe that they would actually achieve that. But if they did, then that's what everyone in the property market has been asking for years. Just enforce the existing rules with tenants and landlords, and you'll solve lots of the problems. And that makes sense because it takes legislation out of Parliament, and it's rather than just throwing more and more legislation that's not going to get enforced, they're saying, let's just enforce existing rules. Now, again, there's nothing to say that they would actually succeed in doing that. But if they did that, it would actually get rid of a lot of the bad landlords as well, if they could do that. Anyway, that's enough. I'm not going to go through any more of that. Looking for some more comments or questions. Billy Goat Scruff says, "Why the hell are we paying banks for printing money when they cause the money in they cause the problem in the first place?" Yeah, good idea. So SS says, "I would love to have Nigel in Parliament and keep a check on Prime Minister and during PMQ." Now this is where, even if he is a lying Trump supporter, he will be a fantastic leader of the opposition if that's what happens, if he manages to pull that off and become the leader of the opposition. By the way, that does look potential. If the trends continue as they have been for the last 2 weeks, at the same pace as they have been for the last 2 weeks, Reform will be in opposition. If they continue. That's just maths, right? If they continue at this rate, Reform will be in opposition. And Nigel Farage, whatever anyone thinks of him, is a very good orator. He does know his stuff, and he will stop Labour, and in particular Keir Starmer, getting away with being mediocre. To use his own words, he'll be a bloody nuisance, and he's good at being that. Eddie Ward says, "Reform equals National Front." I'm sorry. That is simply not true. I know so many people from left and right of politics who are now going to vote reform. There's nothing National Front about them. And that, when people say that, it's an attempt to discredit and demonize anyone and to actually intimidate people away from voting reform. It's just not true. You are not racist if you vote reform. You're just not. That's just not true. I know people who are absolutely not racist and they're going to vote reform. And name calling is only ever a defensive way of stopping other people from voting for what they want to vote for. Okay, it's just not a constructive approach, Eddie. Hope you don't mind me picking you out there because I know you're a regular here. But no, reform is definitely not a wasted vote anymore. I don't think it is. That's definitely not true. It's okay. Nick Who says it's tragic how so many Brits cannot see Farage for the con man he is. I've got two responses to that. Can the other parties say that they've never had any con men in them? No, I mean, especially not the Tories, right? They've definitely been con men, right? So whether he is or he isn't. Secondly, who has he conned? Is that an observation made from something that you know about him? Or is that, again, just a character assassination remark without any basis to it? I don't know, right? Now, I actually have a Nigel Farage story, okay? Doesn't make me more or less of a fan of him. I remain completely objective from a political point of view. But I've been on his TV show twice. Most of you who've been on my channel a long time know that, will have seen those interviews. I was on there discussing housing with him twice. And on the first time, I ended up sitting, just me and him sitting, having a cup of coffee for about half an hour before we went on air. And he told me the story about, because my hobby is I'm a private pilot, right? I fly small planes for a hobby, have done for about 15 years. And he was in a small plane crash. And so that was something we had to talk about. So I asked him about it and asked him to tell me all about it. And all I remember him telling me about it was when he was seriously injured. He was very lucky to survive. And he just told me about how lying on the ground, waiting for medical attention to arrive, he's got his smokes out and just lit up a fag and had a fag. And I wish I could remember the line he said, but it was funny and it made me laugh. And I thought, anyone who's been through a very near-death experience, as I have, I've been through a couple. I got run over when I was a small kid, and I've had a couple of adult close calls with death as well. It does change you when you have a near-death experience. It does change you, and I think I don't know of anyone who gets changed for the worse by a near-death experience. And maybe he was a con man. Maybe you know stuff about him that I don't know. Mr. Beats says, I'm half black, half Irish, military veteran, and I stand with reform. Interesting to know. Can I ask what branch of the military you're in? Be good to know. Eddie Ward says, let the Tories regroup. Maybe they come back stronger in 4 years. You see, I'm genuinely gobsmacked by this. So Eddie is likely to vote Labour, I think, if I'm right in saying that's what you said earlier. And you think that it's a good thing if the Tories regroup and come back stronger in 4 years. Well, what's most likely to happen is that the Reform Party, with or without Farage, will evolve into the newer right-wing party. The Conservatives as a brand, the Tories as a brand, I think are finished. I think they're finished. I really do. That's whatever else happens in this election, that's going to happen. And I think that is an irreversible thing. And I think they've done it to themselves. I think reform is going to grow into the new right wing of politics. Curiacos Paul says UK housing market is just musical chairs. Stamp duty exemption will just make more people take part in musical chairs. I hear what you're saying. If it's a permanent, so temporary stamp duty holidays are always a bad idea. Always a bad idea. Connor on TikTok says Tories are a write-off. They won't come back stronger. They are defunct globalist puppets. Kit Country on TikTok says, waiting to see what the silent majority come up with. Now that takes me back to my earlier point about the silent majority. I think it is a silent majority that are about to decide this election, and it's the silent majority of people who don't feel confident having political discussions in public because they are being slightly out intellectualized by people who consider themselves intellectuals, but are in the minority. And so you have this public political debate is normally between people who consider themselves, and probably are, maybe slightly better than average informed, and you get people who have just as strong feelings but don't have necessarily the ability to actually engage in debate. And the worst thing about the intellectual types that do this is that any time in an argument you're debating with someone and they resort to any form of name calling or any form of personal undermining of either you or the person you're talking about, it's because they have lost the ability to just objectively politically discuss it with you, and they are an intellectual fake, right? Because true intellectuals always have an open mind and can always see both sides of an argument. That's in my experience. And I do not consider myself one of those, by the way. What's going on? Something's going on TikTok, which is right. Sorry about that, TikTokers. Vessi Lou says, I feel that my only option is to spoil my ballot this election. Absolutely. I understand a lot of people feel like that. And that's, that is an important thing to do, because what you are doing is you are acknowledging your right to vote, which is important. And I know that there are a lot of people who think that, oh, just don't vote for any of them. I'm sorry, with an open mind, I've considered this many, many times from many, many angles, and I don't see what that achieves. I don't see what that achieves. I'm yet to be convinced. I remain open-minded, and maybe I'm missing something, but I have yet to be convinced that not voting is anything other than just feckless apathy. Nick Who says, reform is such a laughable name. I'll tell you why you're wrong about that, Nick. Both the Tories and Labour use the word reform repeatedly in their manifestos, in their own manifestos, right? So it's not a laughable name. Everyone from all areas of the country thinks that the political system needs reform, and lots of the country needs reform. And you say, I challenge anyone to name anyone other than Farage and Tice. So that would, if you'd asked me that a few days ago, I wouldn't have come up with any other names. But I heard a chap called Oliver Lewis being interviewed on Radio 4 from the Reform Party. And honestly, I was expecting a posh twat who wasn't going to be able to hold his own. And I was right on one count and wrong on the other count. He was posh, very posh twat. I say that with affection. But he did hold his own. He knew his stuff, and he actually put the Radio 4 interviewer well into their place and stood his ground very impressively. And again, I don't think, Nick, that's a sort of constructive political argument. Again, you're just kind of trying to put them down rather than actually discuss them. Yeah, Sophie, that's true. Patriotic Muslims love reform. One just donated a massive amount to reform, Patriots Unite. So there was the Reform Party's largest donor was announced today, and he is first generation Muslim immigrant who put a long piece in the Telegraph explaining why he's a massive supporter of reform, which has thrown the cat amongst the pigeons in many of the arguments. Yeah, Aaron Hughes says, in addition to that, I also don't agree with Nigel's views on a number of issues. Of course. Now, this is the thing. Again, if you can be open-minded, you look at any party, all parties will have policies you agree with and some that you don't. There's a fascinating survey done a few years ago, I remember, and it said, answer these questions, and from the answer to your questions, we'll tell you which party you're a supporter of. And it was fascinating because most people ended up choosing policies that they thought they sounded right, but were actually the policies of not their own party. There are no parties that have all the right policies, I don't think. That's why you get disagreements within the parties. And so there's no point in picking one policy and saying, well, that policy is stupid, therefore you can't vote for them. Because you can say that about all parties. Joel Didcot Williams says, in Cardiff, Labour are like herpes. What do you mean? That's harsh. Do we have any more questions? I am keeping an eye. Ben Oliver Lewis on TikTok asks, how realistic is a £20,000 minimum tax bracket? Well, they're claiming that they will implement it immediately if they get into power. There's no way they're going to be in power after this election, but they may well be in 2029. That is not impossible. Yeah, someone on TikTok says people are getting seriously scared about reform. I don't know why they're scared of them. You shouldn't just believe what you've heard other people saying about any party. You should just try and go and look for it. Try and go and look for any evidence. Never, ever, ever believe, oh, so-and-so's this, or so-and-so's that, or he said this, or he said that, or I heard this, or I heard that. Go and check it out for yourself, because almost always you will find out that actually it's not what they said at all. And as someone who's been misrepresented a lot, in a very, very small way, I've experienced this amongst agents. So I strongly criticize overvaluing poor agents. And what I discovered when I went to an agent's event, and there were loads of agents there, is that agents who I thought I got on well with, I hadn't seen them for a while, they were all frosty with me. And I went, Jesus, what's up? And they said, well, you've been saying all this stuff. I said, well, what have you heard me saying? Oh, I haven't heard you. It's what I've heard people saying you're saying. I said, give me an example. Oh, they're saying you've said this. No, I never said that. Oh, I've had agents telling me that they've heard I've been telling people not to buy. And I point out to them, no, I've always said you should always buy a home as long as you can afford it. Just don't overpay. And when the agents have heard me say that and clarify, they go, oh, that's not what I heard. So I know what it's like being misrepresented. And what happens across all sides of politics is it's everything. The whole political discussion on social media is basically that. It's very hard to get objective, useful, valuable, informed opinion. Hyperfocus says, how many non-voters are there? Why haven't they voted in the past? Maybe we will see more of these voters voting reform. You remind me of a post I saw. I'll put it up right now on X because I retweeted it because it was interesting. One moment. Here we are. I've got it. Let me just share the screen so you can read it because I think it's really interesting. Someone who calls themselves Giddy Gang Baby, Dan Criprobod, anyway, says, I've never voted in my life. 38 years old. I've always believed the two-party system is a scam. After seeing a shift in Europe and the Reform Manifesto, I've not only registered to vote for the first time, I've got 6 members of my family on board. That's 7 votes for reform. Let's see. So there's that. There's that happening, allegedly. Yeah, Mr. Beat says reform is going to get more votes than people think. Yes, they definitely are. That's something I'm absolutely certain is going to happen. They're going to get more votes than even the polls suggest, more votes than anybody thinks. They're going to get votes from across the spectrum, not just Tory, not just Labour, but Lib Dem as well. They probably won't take any votes away from Green. Because it's this concept of the silent majority. I think the silent majority are fed up with more of the same for so long. They're actually coming out and voting this time, but doing it quietly, because if you say it publicly, you get the kind of reactions that we've seen from some of the comments in this live chat. Rich Brown, Marcus Aurelius would beg to differ, Charlie. Sorry, remind me, beg to differ on what? Because I'm a fan of Marcus Aurelius. Nick Who says critical thinking is so lacking amongst anyone thinking of voting for Farage and Tice. That's an unfair generalization. Ask yourself, why are they doing this? It's fairly obvious. People like that, I just put on the screen, because they're fed up of the Tory and Labour parties achieving nothing and basically being two parties of the two cheeks of the same arse, as George Galloway put it. That's why. So again, for those of you who just joined recently, I want to clarify my position. I remain politically neutral. I've said for a long time, going back years on this channel, I've said when the next election comes around, vote for anyone but Tory or Labour. Anyone but Tory or Labour. And I remember saying, I don't think it's going to make a difference. We're stuck with these two parties. And so I'm excited at the prospect of the disruption to the status quo that reforms rapid expansion means. It does not mean I'm a supporter of them or their policies. I am excited by the potential change to the makeup of the Houses of Parliament. It does not make me a reform supporter. Okay, what do you guys think? Nikki Nike says, John Major was shagging Edwina Curry. Impressed me. I didn't know that. Is that true? I didn't know that. God, we've got good old, it was raging in the comments. Guys, sorry, I'm 25 minutes behind with the comments. I'm going to just I'm going to skip past everyone and get right up to them. Okay, Aaron Hughes asks, what does Charlie think of the groovy greenies? I was very impressed by the leader, the co-leader that they've had on in the debates. I mean, she's an impressive speaker. Comes across clearly, comes across well, very passionately, knows her stuff. I think at one stage, when I voted Green, I did vote Green once, and it was not because of Green policies. It was because I thought that they might have a chance of becoming kingmakers. And there was a number of reasons I voted for them once. I only voted for them once. I don't think I'll vote for them again. Patasi Paul says, if Reform is so popular, then why did they only manage to win 2 council seats in the last local elections? Because Nigel Farage wasn't leading them then. It's Nigel Farage has sort of catalysed their growth. Rich Brown says, Marcus Aurelius would disagree on having nutters for leaders. Okay, all right. I don't know what he says about that, but yeah, okay, I'll take your word for it. I mean, let's look at the people who are the people changing the world the most in the last few decades. I mean, Steve Jobs was a nutter. Elon Musk is a nutter. They're some of the only ones making an actual difference, aren't they? But whatever you think of the difference they're making. Nobody with any so Mac McStar says nobody with any sense takes any notice of the mainstream media. So that's reminding me of something I wanted to say, which is it's important to keep an eye on the mainstream media because that's what large numbers of the population only read and therefore think and are influenced by. Having said that, if you go to any app store, either the Android App Store or the Apple App Store, X, formerly known as Twitter, is the #1 news app download by a long way and has been outgrowing everything. And it's where you will find more up-to-the-minute news, and I think you find a better cross-section of opinions on it on X than you do on it in the mainstream media. So that's my point. And the mainstream media kind of hates X, but also relies on it. So it's interesting. Mac McStar says Farage will scrap first past the post. He has said he'll do that if he gets in, when he gets in, if and when he gets in. That is true. Jack Waldron says, what are Stig's opinions on reform policies? I don't know. Haven't asked him. Santiago says, after 20 years without voting, he couldn't vote for the first 18. I think he found someone to vote. Santiago, I think you're one of the people who said that voting You call it a kleptocacistocracy, don't you? I've seen your posts on X. I'd love to know what that is. I think I know what you mean, but I'd love to know why you think not voting helps, because I think you said that. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Do, 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 do. Craig Wood says, X is not reality, though. X is full of absolute horseshit. Bots galore. Opinions are like arseholes. Everybody has one, and most are covered in shit. That's X in a nutshell. That's definitely what it used to be like. It's changed. It has genuinely changed quite significantly, and I don't find that anymore. They've actually managed to get rid of most of the bots now. I barely see any bots. If you haven't tried it recently, I would have another look. It's changed. So yeah, Santiago saying, I've not voted for the last 35 years, and I will continue the same. I haven't found any party that wouldn't perpetuate the kakistocracy. Could you put down your definition, Santiago, of what kakistocracy is, and I'll put it up on screen for everybody? That'd be cool. Here, Mr. Beat says the mainstream media are very biased. They are all very biased. All of them, whether I think some of them try not to be, but for business reasons. The trouble is, if you are funded by advertising, it's impossible not to be influenced by your advertisers. And the BBC is just, again, it tries very hard, and it really does try very hard. Even has programs questioning its own efforts at remaining impartial, and has all these standards and everything else. But sometimes some of its presenters come out with statements and questions that have pre-assumptions in them that they don't even realize are biased. It's fascinating. Occasionally, even some of the most respected journalists, guys who I really respect, will occasionally come out with stuff that's clearly they are unaware is unconscious bias. Dan Bedford says the hatred and shaming of reform voters says a lot. I agree with that. I respect anyone's decision to vote for whoever they think is right. Right? Well, generally speaking, people vote for one or two reasons. Either it's to improve their own life, or it's to improve the lives of others. Right? That's the only reason people tend to vote. And you can't. No one can say, "Well, I'm right. I've definitely got it right. You're all wrong. You're all stupid. I've got it right." And the one thing that life's taught me is that you can never be certain that you're right. And you always have to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? It's so dangerous not to ask that question when you're making big decisions. And shaming and hatred of any voters of any party is just, in my mind, the opposite point of what democracy is. If you like democracy, then you like people's right to vote for whoever they think is right. And if you want to shame someone for who they want to vote for, that is not a democratic thing to do. It's an anti-democratic thing to do. Any opinion on Scotland, Charlie? Do you think the SNP are out? I don't know, actually. I really don't know. I would love to know, but I don't know. S. Gilly says X is a great platform. I mean, it's definitely better. That's the other thing I meant to say. I think the one reform manifesto pledge that is by far and away the most powerful, no one's talking about, isn't raising the income tax threshold to £20,000. It's raising the 40p threshold to £70,000. That is very clever, because that affects a huge number of people who are working on decent, well-paid jobs who are just not taking home enough money to get by. And there is some evidence to suggest that in that demographic of middle-income people, I say middle-income, obviously, you're only 60, 70 grand, that sounds like a lot of money, but for a lot of people, it is middle-income. They're more likely to be voters as well. So I think that's very, very clever. Craig Wood says, would honestly rather shit in my hands and clap than have an account on X or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. I get that. I totally get that. I can totally understand that. For what it's worth, we are, as we speak now, live streaming on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, because I'm trying to reach as many people as I can with this, but I only spend time engaging on X. It's different from the others, Craig. I promise you it's different from the others, especially since Elon Musk bought it. It's changed a lot. Paul asks, why can't Charlie say biased properly? I don't know. It's bias. Everyone else is bias. Bias. I pride myself in, I can do lots of different accents. I can do all kinds of stuff. BIAS spells bias, doesn't it? Bias. I don't know. It's just, to me, that's the way it should be pronounced. Yeah. Patricia says tonight is good, e.g. varied opinions. Absolutely. And I'm grateful to all of you for what is a passionate but varied and good spirited debate here. Chat NPC on X. Sorry. Says we're heading for another shock with an order of magnitude similar to the Brexit vote. I agree. I do think that's what's going to happen. Mac McStar says, totally agree with you, Charlie, but all the left want to hear is their views coming out of your mouth and they will not listen to anything else. But the thing is, what are the left views? This is the point. Like, can anyone even tell me a Labour policy that isn't already a Tory policy? Genuinely. And Chat NPC says, will Starmer be another Kinnock? No. Kinnock was a good leader. Ignoring his politics, Kinnock really cared. He was a passionate believer in his politics. And he still is, and in his party. And I had a real respect for Neil Kinnock, even though I didn't share his politics at all. I respect him because he was just authentic. That's why I respect Angela Rayner. She is authentic. She's not some fake version of herself. She's authentic. At least she's more authentic than Keir Starmer is, anyway. Yeah, Hyperfocus says, I'm more dubious of people who say they stick up for certain ideologies and then impose silence on others. Absolutely agree with that. You know, if you think about it, we don't learn anything unless we listen to the people we disagree with. Sometimes they are right, you know? Nick Who says, but Farage changed his plan pretty quickly, didn't he? Yes, but people do. People change plans. People change their minds. That's not a reason not to vote for somebody, unless it's because they're flip-flopping on major policies. That's different. Aaron Hughes says, reform can promise all sorts of tax changes, but they're not going to be in the government, so they can promise all sorts. In other words, you're saying that they can just make stuff up and promise it because they're not going to be in government. If they want to have any credibility he's repeatedly talking about the 2029 election already. He says their goal is to get into opposition at this election. That's their real sort of high aim. He says Labour have won, no question, with a majority, but reform aim to be the opposition and then aim to be taken seriously as a party of government in 2029. That is not a wacky idea when you look at the state of the Tory party. Nick Woodward says, Charlie, you can't end this stream without a blast on that drum kit. I have 3 sleeping children here. My other half would kill me, so not tonight, I'm afraid. That's true. Reform's PR is kicking the others out of the park. The youngsters love it. It's really actually been amazing how Nigel Farage has blown up on TikTok in a way the others haven't. All right, Nick, I know I've had you here a lot because you're very, very passionately against Farage. Nick, who are you going to be voting for? Can you tell us that? Can you tell us who you're voting for and why? I think we can probably guess, but it'd be nice to hear. Rich Brown says, after Craig's response about all the other channels, but YouTube is all good. Yeah. YouTube is a bit different from the other ones, though. What are the powers? Ask a very good question. What are the chances of a deal between Tories and Reform? That's a really good question. Really good question. I think the answer to that question depends on exactly what the election results are. I think at the moment there is still a small chance, it's 80% chance of a Labour majority, 20% chance of a hung parliament. If it goes to a hung parliament, and if Reform have got more seats than the Lib Dems or the Tories, and if Reform therefore become kingmakers, and if Reform plus Tories plus Lib Dem is greater than Labour, that's how you just might see a Farage Prime Minister on July the 5th. I mean, none of those things are impossible, right? If it's a hung parliament, and if Reform get more seats than the Tories or the Lib Dems, and if Reform did a coalition with the Tories and Lib Dems, and it gave them a total of more seats than Labour, you might have. This is not impossible. It is not impossible. I mean, it might be unlikely, but it's not impossible. James Rennie 102 says, it's impossible. It's impossible. It's not impossible. It's not complete. Oh my God. Everyone on TikTok said, no. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's not impossible. I just explained it. Sorry. I know how it works, right? It's simple maths. It is not impossible. If Labour get less than 326 votes, it is a hung parliament. If Reform got 120 seats, not votes, sorry, so 320, less than 326 seats, hung parliament. If Reform got, let's say, 120 seats, extremely unlikely, but not impossible, right? Like that poll I showed you earlier actually shows Reform with 109 seats based on the poll result. One of the poll results came in. It is not impossible. Extremely unlikely, but not impossible. And if the Tories got 100 seats, and if Lib Dems got 100 seats, and it added up to more, those three added up to more than Labour's seats, and they wanted to do a deal, they would be able to do a deal. Yeah, seats, not votes. Thanks, Craig. Did you see today Nigel Farage saying that he would cut all ties with the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization? That's a debate not for this channel and for another time, but I would welcome that personally. I would welcome that. Rich Brown says, come on, Charlie, you must have a cheeky wager on Reform. I haven't placed a bet yet. I haven't placed a bet yet. But if I was going to place a bet, I'd be placing a bet on a hung parliament. God, I feel like I have to keep going when the numbers watching keep on going up and up and up. And between all the platforms, we've got nearly 900 of you watching this live, which is just terrifying. Nikki Knight says, it'll be great watching Farage in action in the House of Commons, especially if he is the opposition. I agree with that. Like, whatever you think of him, it will make for much more fiery Prime Minister's question times. Nick Woodward says, the poorer non-establishment Tories will shift to Reform. I agree with that. Yeah, Mac McStar saying the Lib Dems running around the theme park on a log flume. What, like, very, very, like, whoever advising the Lib Dems on their publicity is Disastrous. Yeah, polls in these countries are all over the show. All the polls are all over the place. That's why this is so unpredictable. And I don't think that a Labour landslide is a given. I really don't. Hyperfocus says, I've got to be up at 4 a.m. Go to bed. It's Thursday. You've got to be up in less than 4 hours. Good night, James Barnes. Yeah, a lot of you, it's the witching hour for lots of you if you need to go. All right, guys. I'm probably going to wrap this up now because I need to go to bed too. Have a long day tomorrow. Got lots going on. But this has been fun. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful and helpful. And if I can help you with your move, go to my website, mhwc.co.uk. And you can book time with me. You can book a 30-minute or a 1-hour video call to advise on your move. You can join my private movers Q&A club, which guarantees me to respond. If you want to give me your, just send me a message or reply. That's a much cheaper way of doing it. And I keep on saying, but no one's done it, right? Anyone who's got, if you've got a question on moving that you want to guarantee that I answer for free, send it to me in a video clip or an audio clip. Now, provided it is a appropriate question about moving, and you send it to me in a video clip that I can use on my channels or an audio clip I can use, I will answer it. All right. Send it to me on Instagram private message or Facebook private message or on X. You can do a private message. You can send an audio clip or video clip. Any of those places you can send me a video message. All right, guys. But otherwise, unless you got questions. Yeah, Patricia says, great chat. Don't care who you vote for, but do vote. I agree with that. Do vote, do vote, do vote. Is that a Rolex watch? RAF Blue asks. No, believe it or not, this is a smartwatch. It's a Swedish smartwatch called a Kronoby, and I love it. And I love it because it looks like a traditional watch. It's only 400 quid, and yet it's a smartwatch, and it talks to my phone and has all kinds of cool functions. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. And if you did enjoy it, give us one of those. And if you want to make sure you don't miss the future ones, you know what to do. Click that big red button. Thank you all very much. And also, I genuinely think that the content in the live chat tonight was really, really constructive and positive. Passionate, blunt, direct, all of it very, very cool. But I really am actually quite proud of my audience. You are a passionate, switched on bunch of people who are open to having these conversations. So I love it. That's cool. Have a great night, guys. Sleep well. See you on the next one. Have a good one.